Yeah. Welcome to the room where queens rise, where voices get louder, where power meets purpose. This is Linda Love Talks. Started with a vision, fire in my soul. Turned every setback into solid gold. Crown on my mindset, thrown in my lane. Speaking true louder, breaking every chain.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Linda Love Talks. I hope you're having a wonderful day. And if you're not, I hope this podcast will somehow entertain you, educate you, or even distract you. But anyhow, the podcast where we bring you the most powerful conversations with leaders, change makers, and voices shaping the future. I'm your host, Linda Love. Today's episode features Michael Pissos, a dedicated public servant with a truly inspiring journey. Michael is currently the Community Relations Coordinator for the Mayor of the City of Phoenix, where he works to create better connections between government and the community. He's also pursuing his master's in public affairs at Indiana University in Bloomington, building the knowledge and skills to impact public policy on an even broader scale. Michael's path to leadership is grounded in service. He's also a former police officer and a proud member of the United States Army Reserves. I feel like I've said enough, but anyways, his experiences have given him a unique perspective on public service, civic responsibility, and leadership. In this episode, we dive into the current state of politics and exploring the challenges and opportunities and responsibilities that come with serving communities and shaping public policy in today's world. So sit back, tune in, and join in. Help me welcome Michael Pissos to Linda Love Talks. So, welcome everyone. Welcome back to season 4. And of course, this season I'm bringing a lot more political guests. And here with us is Michael Pissos. Did I pronounce your name right? Did I get it right?
You did. I'm
Okay,
pleasantly surprised.
I am too. I got it right on the first shot, so that's good. Um, so Michael is actually driving, but I don't mind. It'll just be a more interesting podcast today. So, Michael, tell us a little bit about your career. I mean, you've had a very interesting career. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so you're right. I think I would. Interesting certainly sums it up. I started out my career actually in law enforcement straight out of college. I was hired as a police officer back where I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. I worked just to the south, one city to the south of Cleveland. I spent some time there before I made my intention on joining the Army Reserves. I did join the Army Reserves. Ironically, on January 6, 2021, I was actually finalizing my paperwork with the recruiters to take my oath the next day, obviously, all while the insurrection was going on. So I went through Army training, ended up relocating out to Phoenix, where my Army unit still is. So I drill out here in Mesa, Arizona, to be more specific. Carried on my law enforcement career a little bit out here before I decided that my competing interest of politics, I would say, got the best of me. And that's something that I thought I could see myself doing for the next however many years for the rest of my working career. And so I made the decision to transfer over. Went to George Washington University, got my graduate degree in political management, and so that sort of aided with the transition. My education was in law enforcement. My working experience was in law enforcement, and so I thought I needed something to kind of push me over the hump to get me into the political arena, and so that it was.
Wow, and what an arena to join.
Yes, and now I'm here. So I went into politics, ended up working for a national political group based out of DC, did that for over a year. Then I brought it a little bit more local, worked for a congressional campaign out here in Arizona's first congressional district, one of the most sought after districts in the country. It's a swing district. The Republicans hold it right now. Representative David Schweikert, the Democrats are chomping at the bit to get that district. So I worked that congressional race last year. We came second in the primary out of 6. So we lost that race. I then went right over to Phoenix Mayor Kate Gallego's reelection campaign. We successfully reelected Mayor Gallego, and then I transitioned over to City Hall, where I currently work in the office of the mayor.
Wow. What a transition. And what an interesting career. So my next question is, are you on the red team or blue team, or does it even matter?
So I am a registered Democrat, although I try not to look at it, in terms of teams.
Yeah.
Um, I'd like to think that, I agree more with the Democratic Party, but I try not to look at, people who register as Republican or independent or anything for that matter as sort of the other team. I'm of this mindset, and maybe it's a dying breed, but I think we should all be working together. Obviously, there are people with, major policy differences, and that's okay. But at the end of the day, I think it's just that. It's policy differences. We're all human. We're all, for the most part, we all want the best for this country, for our communities, for our states. Oftentimes we just differ on what policies will help us achieve that, achieve the end goal. And again, most of our end goal is for, you know, what's best for our country. I think we just prioritize different things. And so, having said that, yes, I am a registered Democrat. I know that was a long answer to a very simple question, but yeah.
That's okay. I couldn't agree with you more. What in Reagan's name is going on?
What in Reagan's name is going on?
Yes. Is it just me, or is it just more, is politics just overall more intense than it has ever been, do you feel?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people say, oh, it's we're living in as partisan of a times as there's ever been, and I think, or they like to say the country's more divided than we've ever been. I'm not sure that's the case. We did go to civil war against each other, and so it's hard to sort of top that. But I do think, in terms of the partisanship of our elected officials, um, yeah, I think we're definitely towards a low point right now. Everything's political. Everyone, again, it's like the whole team mindset where, you know, if you're in the same party as someone, they must be correct on everything, and you've got to oppose the other party at all costs, even if it's, sacrificing what oftentimes is the good of our communities or our states or the country, just to be able to score a political win. And so, yeah, I do think that the partisanship is quite bad. I'd like to see it get better. I wish we could all remember that, we're all Americans, we're all human beings. And again, it just goes back to that whole, at the end of the day, what we have is policy disagreements. And, of course, there are some of our fellow peers that don't share our same values. And that's okay. But, for the most part, if you just sit down and you put a Democrat and a Republican in a room and you force them to sit down and talk to each other, things are going to be fine. And they're probably going to find that they agree on most things, in life. And so I think if we could just get back to seeing people for what they are, and, they're our neighbors, they're fellow human beings, they go to the same stores that we go to, they cheer for the same sports teams, they enjoy oftentimes the same hobbies. And so, I think if we get back to that mindset, maybe, just maybe, we can turn down the political, we could turn down the heat a little bit in our discourse amongst each other.
Absolutely. And you know what? No one's ever going to have it absolutely perfect. I mean, for God's sakes, Christians can't, we're not perfect. Christians, there's over 45,000 different varieties of Christians in the world, and over 10,000 religions. So who to say is the most perfect or who is right with regards to their view? I find it very difficult. Our last voter turnout was low. Do you think that people just don't care anymore, or how do we get them to care?
I think the last election, that was sort of a special case, and this is just my opinion, but I think for the most part, what you saw was a lot of dissatisfaction amongst, the two major party nominees. For the longest time, obviously, it was President Biden against former President Trump. You looked at the polls. Depending on the poll, sometimes over 60, close to 70% of people didn't approve of the two options and said they wanted a different choice. And so, I think the perceived quality of the nominees plays into it. I think if we can get folks up there who are exciting, who people can feel good about voting for, and maybe it's not just voting against the opponent. I think that's one way to increase voter participation. I think the other thing is that a lot of people are disillusioned with the parties. There's record amounts of folks who are identifying as independent. In some surveys, it's as much as 50%. You have a 50% split of independents, 25% Democrats, 25% Republicans, give or take a few. Again, that all depends on the poll. But I think it goes to the whole, a lot of people are sick and tired of the political parties. They don't feel that they've represented them. They represent them anymore. Maybe they felt like the parties have gone too far in their own direction. And so I think that also plays to, people's lack of involvement. People just get, disillusioned and they say, oh, well, I'm politically homeless. There's not a party out there that represents me, or there's not a candidate out there that represents me. So why should I participate in this system? And so I think that plays a little bit into it as well.
Yeah, definitely. Especially this last election with our previous president, age became such an issue. Do you believe should there be an age limit for a president candidate?
That's such a good question, because I know, especially now more than ever, that's a very popular idea that's kind of floated out there. Whether people talk about age or term limits, at least not for presidents, we already have that, but for members of Congress, I think it all sort of gets at the same thing. People want more youth in there. At the end of the day, I don't know that I support age limits, and I understand where proponents of that come from, but I believe it would take a constitutional amendment. It goes beyond the three requirements, which are you must be 35 years old, natural born U.S. citizen of the United States for the past 14 years. And so I don't know. And then the next question is, okay, what do we put that age at? Do we just choose an arbitrary number?
Right.
Is there a certain number that is backed by science? I don't think the problem is as much age as it is, acuity and physical stamina. I think those are the questions that we should be asking.
Right.
Not all 75-year-olds are the same.
Absolutely.
Or not 80-year-olds or 70-year-olds.
Absolutely. And cognitive, and the issue is cognitive, right? And the decline of cognitive. And there is
Absolutely.
some medical, and there is some research out there that suggests a certain age. So my next question, that kind of leads into my next question. Should presidential candidates take an exam? And the only reason why I throw this out, because I think of it as a simple terms and my simple mind thinking here of, I just feel like there's so many jobs out in this country that it's like, for God's sakes, to be a cashier, you have to take an exam. To be a truck driver, you have to take an exam. To become an attorney, you have to, before you even apply for law school, you have to take a test called the LSATs. Why is there not such a thing for the highest office in the land?
Yeah, I think that's another question. And I think that also goes back to the whole, I think they left public office open to, the vast majority of the citizens. And I think they did so on purpose. That's another thing that I believe would require a constitutional amendment. And I get the purpose. I get what people are getting at in terms of requiring, an age limit or, a mental test. But then I guess I would respond, okay, what would that test be? What are we testing for? Is it an IQ test? Is it a personality test? Is it an aptitude test? And so I guess that's what I would sort of be interested in learning more, like what exactly are we testing them for?
Right.
So I can't sit here and say that off the bat I would support it. Not that my support means anything on a national scale, but
right.
In terms of my personal support, I don't know. I do like the idea of, you know, reducing the barriers. And it's funny because, on paper, president has one of the fewest barriers. You don't take, like you said, a criminal background check, or you don't take a test. There's no licensing, there's no certification. But
Right.
in reality, in practice, it's one of the highest barriers of any job. You have to be extraordinarily well connected. Oftentimes, you have to be of a certain socioeconomic status. And so, while on paper it sounds like, oh, virtually anyone, 35 and above in this country, the vast majority of people can run for president. It's not so easy in practice. But yeah, I don't know. I'm hard pressed to sort of add those constitutional, you know, additional requirements. Although, again, I know that they're for a positive purpose. The end result is to hopefully increase the quality of our selection and of our choices in running for president. And so I get that aspect of it.
And you know what's interesting is I believe in history, I'd have to look it up, but we've only had one president in all of our American history that was actually from the working class. Just one. The rest of them
Interesting.
were upper middle class or affluent. So that's very interesting that you brought that up. The next question, since we're talking about presidents and eras, what's been your favorite era or your favorite president that you have the fondest memory?
Well, how could I, fortunately, I think I'm fortunate in saying I don't remember too many presidents. But I would have to say, obviously I've now been through, two terms, well, into two terms of Donald Trump. We've had a term of Joe Biden, two terms of Barack Obama. I was born in 1998, so I don't remember the George Bush years too well. Um, and of course, even if there was things that I could remember from those times, it certainly wasn't any content, any sort of political lens or political context. So I'd have to say, Barack Obama, because I was at that age where I knew what was happening, I knew what was going on. I was following, not just did I know what was happening, but I was an active follower of what was going on. Yeah, I'd have to say Barack Obama years.
Wow. Okay.
Um, and not that there was anything necessarily wrong, with that's not an insult to anyone else, but obviously Joe Biden came in. We had COVID, which wasn't his fault, but I don't remember 2020 in the most positive of contexts, and that sort of, that lasted a little while, and so through no fault of the president. But yeah, I would say the Barack Obama years, and I miss him as just as a leader and as a person and as an orator, and just the grace and the presence that he brought to the office, I thought was admirable. And even, even for people out there who don't necessarily maybe agree with his policies,
Right.
I thought his presence, and yeah, hard guy to not like, in my opinion. Again, you may disagree with his policies. You might say I'm a lifelong Republican, lifelong conservative, and I don't agree with any of the things that he did. But on a personal level, not that I've gotten ever personal with Barack Obama, but on a personal level, it's hard to, to not at least respect the guy. And I think,
Yes.
in today's times, I think that's something that would be really nice to have.
I actually miss the Clinton years. I remember being in grade school and like my grade school had a vote and we actually voted for the president. And then I felt like it was magical because my class voted for Clinton and then Bill Clinton did become president. So I just felt like, oh my God, oh, my vote counted or whatever, even though it was like
Totally.
a mock election for grade school just to teach us a little bit about politics. But it was so interesting because the the things that he messed up on, because no leader is perfect, no president is perfect, seems so minor compared to fast forward the year of now and in these future times. I also miss senators and representatives and these higher offices being an office of respect and civility, I think I miss that. I don't like the way our government is treating each other across the board. Whatever you are, whether you're Republican or Democrat, I just don't like the way they're treating each other. I don't think that a house divided can ever uh do anything, literally.
Yeah, that makes two of us. I think a lot of what we see nowadays is just it's petty, it's childish, it's quite frankly, it's embarrassing and unbecoming. Um, and it happens on both sides too. It's so
Mhm.
easy to just point fingers at quote unquote the other side, which I hate looking at it that way. That goes back to that whole team mindset. But a lot of people say, "Oh, it's just the other side," but it truthfully happens. There are folks in both parties who do virtually the same things and behave in the similar ways and utilize the same sort of tactics and discourse or lack thereof. And so, yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Moving on to the next question. Um, where's the country going, and does the country have a future?
It's hard to say right now. I'm interested in where we're going. I would love to know. I'm seeking that answer too. I think. Um, yeah, I think we've got a future. I think what that future is, you know, unknown at the time. There's a lot of sort of question marks. I think out there. Obviously we're early on in a presidential administration that has gotten off to a very aggressive start. I think they would admit themselves. And so, I don't know. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news. I don't want to be overly naive either, but I think I'm interested in that question just as much as you. I wish I had a better answer, but
I think
it's a
reflecting,
roller coaster ride, that's for sure.
it definitely is. I think it's a pivotal moment that we're living in, and it's definitely we're going to see whether the three powers that govern us, which is executive, judicial, and the presidential, if if some of these other powers will hold their grounds, or will they cave in? I think that's definitely the crossroads that we're entering in. And I think this situation will perhaps, I think we'll have a couple years of lots of changes that for some people will be th- different, and for other people um will be something that perhaps they always wanted, but they don't realize the consequences of these actions. But I think the pendulum will swing. I have a feeling that we as Americans in general, I don't think we're extremist. I don't think we're extreme right or extreme left. I think if you polled people and asked for their opinion, most people are kind of like in the middle. We're not, right?
I Yeah, you're preaching to the choir on that one.
I
I have
think
said that for a long time.
I really do think people are like, well, do they like this or do they like that? Do they care for immigrants, or do they care for their neighbor who is looks different from them, or do they care for equal rights? And I would tell you most people have voted because of monetary reasons and because of they want to see more money in their pockets. I don't think
Totally.
they wanted lots of individuals losing their jobs or agencies closing. So I'm hoping that eventually in a few years, the pendulum will swing, and it will swing as extreme as it has swung, that way. It'll swing maybe over to the left. And that will bring about changes and maybe some restoration of certain services that are not going to be with are no longer going to exist. But I think some there's going to be new leaders, and I think hopefully in the future there will be restoration. Do I have hopes for the future? Yes, Michael, I have huge hopes for the future, only because I know of so many wonderful individuals that work in politics that I do see a future for them in politics. One of them is you. And
Thank you. Very kind.
One of them is you, and I'm hoping the best. And I think that's what it is too. I think an era comes and goes, and I think there's people that really do care about equality and fairness and, care for the country to be more lucrative. I think there is such a thing as taxes to be fair to all social economic groups. There's such a thing. It can be done if you know your mathematics and your economy. And I also think there is a way for everyone to benefit and live in this country. Um, and I think that's in my ideology, I think that's the government's job. But
Sure.
everyone, I think everyone has a different ideology on that. It is the government's job to provide and to make sure that its people is taken care of. And so, moving on to the last question, do you have anything to promote?
Promote. Oh gosh. Oh, well, yeah. How about the city of Phoenix?
There we go.
I think I love Phoenix. I would say, yeah, if there's anything I could promote, I would say come take a vacation in Phoenix. Come check it out. Come stay at one of our resorts. Come play some golf. Come enjoy our hiking. Eat at our restaurants. I visited Phoenix back in 2017 for the first time. Loved it. Ended up moving out here, and that was strictly because of my visit. There's an opportunity in the Army Reserves for me to join a unit that was out here, and I did so, as I made mention to earlier. And so, yeah, if there's anything I could promote, the city of Phoenix, there's a lot going on out here. And there's a lot of opportunity, beyond just the tourism for those who are looking to maybe make a move, maybe try out a new place, change of scenery. Come see what Phoenix has to offer. And this is going hand in hand with what I do for work anyway, so
Yeah, that's
maybe
what I
get some
figured.
brownie points there. I'm being a good employee even off the clock.
Which I totally told you you might as well. So Michael, last thing, and it's the question I ask all my guests. What is your message for the audience?
I think the biggest one, and I know I talked about it earlier, and I probably ranted about it earlier, but just remember as we go through life and as we deal with people, especially in the context of politics, but really anything, just goes beyond politics. I know this happens to be focused about politics, but we're all human. We've all got families. We all have people out there who love us. And so, just remember that there are a lot of things that bring us together. And again, more specifically in the context of politics, at the end of the day, in the vast majority of situations, you might be a Democrat, one might be a Republican, but what it oftentimes boils down to is just a simple disagreement on policy of how to get the best possible outcome for our country. And, I think when you turn on the news nowadays, or you see some of the things that happen in Washington or even outside of Washington, it's hard to think of it in those terms and in that context. But, if you really think about it, what is the difference between a Democrat and Republican? It's differences on public policy. That's all it is. And so I think if there's anything else or anything that I could leave the audience with, the people who vote differently than you, they're not the enemy. They're not Hitler. They're not out to destroy the country, no matter what their political party is. You probably just disagree on, what is hopefully the same end result, and that's how to make our country as strong and prosperous as it can be.
Wow.
So
That was such a good ending. That's such a positive way to end this this
I have to
podcast
go out on a
episode.
positive wave.
That was very positive.
I can't leave it doom and gloom.
That was very positive. That was woo, that was excellent. Thank you so much for joining me on this podcast.
Your voice is power. Your story matters. Your voice is power. Yeah. Your story matters. Now let's talk. Linda Love Talks.